This is the 20th of January, 2014. I'm very excited. Just before Christmas, a producer and a director got very excited about a book that I wrote 20 years ago and wants to make it into a movie. So we're moving forward with that. We've already created a beautiful song for it called Pretend. I wrote the lyrics, and Bobby Gillum, a masterful composer and keyboardist, did the tune for it. And his wife sang it. It came out beautifully. So we're very excited. The story is called Santa Claus Rides Again. That was the title of the book that I wrote 30 years ago. And we're going to abbreviate it a little in the film version and call it Santa Rides Again. So I want to share with you a little bit of the story. And to do that, I'm going to read from the original book that I said, I wrote 30 years ago after I pick up the glasses that I dropped over here. Maybe I'm just too excited. I don't know. Anyway, here we go. Chapter 1, The Completion. Red Star was done, and at last the old one was pleased. This phase had been more arduous than the last, but then each phase was always more arduous than the last, for it built on what had gone before. A master of the sixth pinnacle of illusion he now was. All that remained was the teaching of another. A feeling of pride coursed through the blood of the old Indian body, but not a hint of it appeared on his face. It was fine for youth to let their face mirror their feelings, but for the old chief it was enough for him to just feel it in his blood. He does well, our son, the spirit of Red Star's wife reflected, as together they watched the old one take the boy through the final steps of the third pinnacle of illusion. Yes, he does well, Red Star thought back to her, with more pride than he had felt for his own accomplishment. The full return of the spirit of his wife had occurred on the fourth level of the chief's training. Now they could again speak to each other as they did when she had lived in body. With the completion of the sixth level, he could even hug her, as he had done first when he was but a young brave. This, he felt, was the greatest of the gifts that the old one had led him to. Together they now watched their son Sky Cloud as he finished the final steps of the training. He was the youngest spirit to ever attain the level, and this time Red Star's pride did reflect on the face of his old body. Thunderpaws, Sky Cloud's beloved St. Bernard, sat quietly next to Red Star. The 10-inch ditch dug in the snow by his ever-wagging tail was the only thing that reflected his excitement as he too watched his master. The fact that Thunderpaws was otherwise still was a miracle akin to the sixth level of completion itself. But he knew that this was a tense moment, so he checked his nearly overwhelming impulse to jump on Sky Cloud in an acknowledgement of how well his master was doing. He would do so the moment that the test was over. The air was crisp and clear, as it nearly always was in this part of the Yukon. The huge white cumulus clouds parted briefly as they sailed past the sharp peaks of the mountain. They again became one on the other side of the peaks as they continued their journey southward. They had a long way to go if they were going to arrive in Los Angeles in time for the illusion. They seemed to speed up, almost as if they knew they had better get a move on. The old one had not yet told Red Star and Sky Cloud that the new student had already been selected and an invitation had been prepared and sent. He would tell them when Sky Cloud was done. The old one had been watching on the day when the young man walked out of the movie with his young nephew Toby. He had seen him dream up the effort-subtracting drill. It was the final signal that said he was at last ready to begin his training. The old one was pleased. One could not say that he handled the ridicule well that he had received from the onslaught of the one who sought to ridicule him at every turn. But then he had not been trained to deal with such things. In fact, the fact that he still did the drill that he dreamed up, despite his worry and concern, did him credit. There would be much for him to conquer. It was uncertain if he could make it or not, but he had at least earned the right to a chance. So the invitation was sent. It would arrive on the evening of the day they called Friday. So that's the introduction to the story, which in the script is going to be told by a storyteller. It's going to kind of open up with an image of Sky Cloud and Red Star being trained by the old one, and then in voiceover you're going to hear the storyteller pretty much reading what I just read to you. And then we're going to cut back and forth between the images of Red Star, his wife, the old one, and the Yukon. And then the storyteller will move into telling the beginning of the chapter 2, which I'm going to read to you, but of course in the film it will shift into a lot of imagery. But here we go. I'm going to do chapter 2 with you. Chapter 2 is entitled Clancy. Clancy. The old one calls him son of the Irish. Clancy. So here we go. The snow-covered peaks of the great misty mountain broke through the tops of the gray storm clouds that covered the lands below. The highest of their peaks nearly touched the bottom of the long rectangular lamp that hung above Clancy's writing desk. Off to the left, the entire fourth wing of the clan's finest fighting dragons floated comfortably on the surface of the clouds. Most of them were calm and assured as they awaited the signal to begin the dive. Far below, the dark and eerie marshlands of Boltar the Wicked basted in the stench and grimy atmosphere of evil. Clancy pulled his feet up higher on the stool. He curved his toes inward as if he were trying to pull them out of the green slime of the swamplands, for who knows what kinds of creatures slither through the dark waters in hopes of eating anything that they can get their claws on. Off to the right, and above Clancy's head, Wurzel, the son of Tendor the Great, remained ready. The sheer power of his great dragon wings held his young muscular body nearly suspended in the air above the clouds. As wing lieutenant, it was his right to lead the first wave against the forces of Boltar. Clancy's new felt pen trembled now in readiness. The words that he scribbled onto the page would have to be rewritten later, for no mortal could decipher their meaning now. The 500 dragons of the fourth wing rose off the cloud at Wurzel's nod. They hovered now above the clouds in readiness, preparing for the dive. The body of their great leader arched and rolled forth into the dive, and they were off. Slicing through the storm clouds, they were ready and willing to face the evil that they knew would greet them the moment they emerged. The crash was sudden and unexpected. The shattering of glass and metal had not been predicted. For a moment, it was as if the whole universe itself suddenly erupted into sheer chaos. The entire fourth wing of the dragons was engulfed in flames. The land and the sky itself seemed to burst into sheets of fire and smoke, and even the great Wurzel himself disappeared as the sound of the crash burst through the delicate fibers of Clancy's imagination. And then the apology came. "Sorry, Clancy," George exclaimed. I didn't see the table. I was just coming in to borrow a pen. I know how it is when you're in the middle of writing something real great, and then suddenly interrupts you. Hope it wasn't a key part I hope you can get back to it. I hope like the ringing of the phone wouldn't interrupt the story, but it did. But anyway, I'm sorry. All right, I know how it is when you're in the middle of writing something really great and then somebody interrupts you. Hope it wasn't a key part. Hope you can get back to it if it was. I'm really sorry. I'll clean it all up. I didn't see the thing. It seemed to happen to me all the time. I was into the middle of a high point myself, and my pen suddenly ran out of ink. I really didn't see the thing. I'm sorry. George, Clancy cut in. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's no big thing. Here's a pen. Here's a box of pens. Now get back to your story. But the mess, George protested. Forget the mess, George. The story's more important than the mess. Now go finish your story. We'll clean it up later. But George, but George, go before I lose my trend of thought. That got him. George left. That's kind of where the story was at. George is Clancy's closest friend. He works with him in the office. As you might have gathered by this particular point in time, Clancy's a writer of children's stories, fantasy children's stories. He has a nephew, Toby. And in the office, the girl that he hopes to love one day, Ginny, is there. Beatrice is kind of the office mother and keeps everybody calm and handles all the upsets that occur. And there's an antagonist, of course, in the office who is always bugging Clancy about the idea that he's filling his nephew's head with wild and crazy fantasies, and that's not good for the kid. He's got to face reality. Well, the story really kind of takes off when Clancy takes his nephew, Toby, to see Superman, the original Superman movie, the one with Christopher Reeves, that I consider to be the greatest thing that's been created so far. Anyway, they go to the Chinese theater, and on the way out, they're just like all excited. Clancy's excited, Toby's excited, and Clancy's saying to his nephew Toby, he's saying, did you see the difference between the old movies of Superman I showed you, the ones where you would kind of like, in order to get in the air, he would kind of like jump and kind of like he was on a trampoline or something, and he would jump himself up into the air. But you just see the difference here, that in this one, when Superman was with Lois, he held her in his arms. He just kind of raised his arm, and they glided up into the air. It was effortless, and that's the key. That's the key. If we could subtract the effort out of everything, we would be able to fly. Really? 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 Uncle Clancy, we could fly? Whoa, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's subtract the effort out of everything, his nephew says. And we'll fly. Let's do it. Let's do it. Oh, Clancy goes, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into, right? But he creates this effort subtracting drill, this kind of exercise where you subtract the effort out of whatever you do. If you go to lift something heavy, you kind of feel the effort and see if you can subtract it. And they kind of have a lot of fun with this, and even some odd kind of weird things happen. But after the antagonist in the office learns about this, he kind of really bugging Clancy with the idea that he could be really damaging his son with all of this fantasy, and especially with this idea of subtracting effort out of thing, and that you would be able to fly. How insane, how crazy, And Clancy gets really worried about this. He kind of he has on his desk one of Einstein's great quotes where he says reality is an illusion, and that contributes to him writing the stories, but he gets really concerned that maybe he is messing up the kid, or doing something that could harm him. And he loves him so much that it really bugs him. So, he kind of goes off that evening, and he goes over to Griffith Park. He loves to hang out in Griffith Park, especially at night, next to the carousel that Walt Disney claims was his inspiration for building Disneyland when he used to take his kids there. So he's sitting there at night, and the big cumulus clouds that the old one had instructed to come over into the area. They were going by a big full moon, and all of a sudden Clancy sees this sleigh fly across the face of the moon, reindeer and sleigh, and he goes, oh, he gets, whoa, what was that? The next day he gets together with George, and he's like trying to figure it out. You know, they have this way of figuring out, you know, whether they're going to do like a scientific approach to it and see, you know, was this real, or was this something your mind created, or, you know, was it real? And they get into all of this, and they work on it, and then they go for a ride together, and they go out. This is kind of a funny part of the story. They go out into the country. They're riding. It's a beautiful day, and they go by this typical white church that you would see in the country. And they hear coming out of the church, "The Lord come down and he's saying Noah." And they went, whoa, you know. And they make a U-turn, and they go up into the vestibule of this church. And a big black man, you know, is all smiling and says, "Come on in, brothers, welcome." You know, and they go into the church. There are only two white guys in the church. It's a black congregation, and they're singing and wailing, and they have a great time. And Clancy and George were brought up Catholic, so they're not used to this kind of thing, but they love it. They love the music, they love the sound. And at one point, the preacher gets up after the choir finishes, and he says, "Today, I was going to tell you the difference between really knowing and only believing," he says, right? He said, Clancy goes, so he goes to George, he says, "Whoa, this is going to be good." And the preacher says, "Sister Sarah, I want you to come up here with your 13 children. And this big black woman comes up with 13 kids, every size, 2 in her arms. And then he says, "Brother Joe, I want you to come up here too." That was her husband. And they're all facing the congregation, and the preacher says, "Now you all see Sister Sarah here and her 13 children." And they all go, "Yes, amen, praise the Lord." You know, they respond, not like the Catholic upbringing that George and Clancy had, you know, but they love it. They kind of get into it too. And they're all going, "Yes, we see him." And the preacher says, "Now, Sister Sarah here, she really knows that them's her children. But Brother Joe here, he only believes." And they go, whoa, they thought that was great. On the way out, they're talking now, wow, you know, that was really interesting. The difference between really knowing and only believing. And, you know, and George says to him, "The sleigh you saw, do you really know that it was real?" And he says, "Well, I don't really know, but I believe it was. I sure saw it. It was real clear, you know." So anyway, the story's going on. The kid, Toby, is all excited. He keeps doing, night and day, he's doing these effort subtracting drills. And so much so that he doesn't even want to go visit his grandfather, who lives on the East Coast, his favorite grandfather. They always have a wonderful time together. And he wants to keep working on the effort subtracting drills. And Clancy's going, "Oh, no." And the office guy is going, "See, I told you. I told you what, you know, that's going to negatively affect the kid," right? So Clancy gets all concerned about that, but he talks Toby into going anyway. And then he gets together with his girl, and they, you know, and she comforts him, you know, and helps him with his worry about what's going to happen to Toby. And when Toby comes back, he's all excited. He says, "You know, we did the effort subtracting drill. I trained Grandpa how to do it, and we were doing it. It was really great." And Clancy's going, "Oh, no." And what they do is he takes the kid up to a cabin that his grandfather owns in the Yukon. And they've gone up there every now and then for years. In fact, they go up once a year. And they're picked up at the station by Sky Cloud, by the young Indian chief who had been trained. And I'm getting interrupted with that. What is that called? Anyway, never mind. So anyway, they get there, and the story progresses. You know, Clancy speaks to Sky Cloud and tells him that, you know, what he's done, and he's worried about the kid. He's all into the effort subtracting drill, and, you know, and he thinks it's possible to fly. And Sky Cloud says, "And you don't? You don't think it's possible?" Of course Of course, I mean, you can't really fly. You know, Clancy goes back into his reel, and he said that not necessarily. You know, you can always fly in your own space. And he goes, what do you mean your own space? And this becomes a whole mystery. What is your own space? And they start learning about creating your own space. And one day they're riding around. They ride around. There's a team of reindeer that draw a sleigh. And Sky Cloud takes them out. And at night, when Clancy's alone, he actually gets an image of the old one in this wonderful song called Pretend plays in the background. And after that, Sky Cloud takes Toby and Clancy on a trip into the backcountry of the Yukon, the real wilderness. And as they're going through it, they come through into a clearing and they see this barn in the middle of nowhere in virgin country that shouldn't be there. And Sky Cloud drops them off at the barn and leaves. And they're going, they're yelling after, what is going on? And they go into the barn and there's all of this raw material. There's iron and steel bars and there's wood, and they don't know what the heck is going on. But somehow Toby gets the idea that they're supposed to build a sleigh. How the heck are they going to build a sleigh? There's no tools. There's only just raw material. Well, that's where it starts to get really magical. You know, Clancy tries heating up the metal. He kind of falls into this is something that they're supposed to do. They're all supposed to build a sleigh that will fly in their own space. They get a message from the old one. But they don't know how to do it. And as they're going on, Clancy heats up the metal and burns himself and gets all frustrated and runs outside of the barn and goes, this is crazy. This is nuts. This cannot be done. And Toby kind of gets him back in. And anyway, there's a lot of details at that part of the story. They eventually actually build the sleigh. And then they learn to, every day they are practicing with a reindeer, moving at great speeds through the space of the others. They are very much cautioned not to create their own space. And when Clancy finally breaks the rules at one of the climax of the film, a tragedy occurs. But the tragedy is overcome. And as the story continues, they eventually do not only get the sleigh, but the reindeer to fly. And in the climax of the film, you see images of Hollywood Boulevard. In fact, there's these two black guys that goes, one of them turns to the other one, he says, my God, look at that. And the other guy goes, look at what? Look, that. What? It's snowing. Are you crazy? It doesn't snow in Hollywood. This is Hollywood, California. It doesn't snow. Yeah, well, then what the hell is that? What the hell is what? And we keep getting the viewpoint of the one guy who's actually seeing the snow, and the boulevard is getting covered with the snow, and the other guy looking at the exact point of view, he doesn't see any snow, right? And then there's a woman, an elderly woman who sees the snow on the ground. She's amazed. She bends down, she picks it up to see if it's real, starts laughing, rubs it on her face, looks up and sees the sleigh coming out of the sky, down. It levels off with Toby and Clancy, who are absolutely, of course, delighted and thrilled. They come down, flying about 4 or 5 feet off the ground on Hollywood Boulevard, down the boulevard, just skimming across the tops of the cars. And one of the guys goes, whoa, did you see that, as the sleigh goes by? And the other guy goes, see what? Some of them see it and some of them don't, right? And there's some great climaxes that occur. I'm not going to share all of the secrets of the story, but it cuts back eventually to the storyteller who's telling the story to 2 young kids, a girl, Sally, and a boy, Bill. And Sally says, or Bill, I forget which one it was, either Bill or Sally says, did everybody see it fly? And And the storyteller says, no, not everybody. Why not? Sally wants to know. Well, because only some people's spaces would link in with Clancy's. And you can't see something if you don't believe that it can happen. And anyway, that's kind of like a little bit of the highlights of the film. I'm writing the script. I'm very excited about it. I think it's going to be a really, really fun movie. We got some great music. We got some beautiful people that are coming together in the crew. We got my closest friend, Paul Gibbons, who's actually recording this video right now, and his gal, Athena. They're going to help me put together a presentation. We've got some people who say they're going to raise all of the money for the film, and we're going to make it happen. It's going to appear on the real screen. So there's been a little bit of just sharing where we're at. Like I said, I just started the script just 2 or 3 days ago, but very excited about the film Santa Flies Again.
Pretend that life's a pretense, because it really is. Pretend that everything we see is made by you and me. Pretend it's all illusions, and soon we all will see that life and love and the games we play are made by thee and me. Pretend that life's a pretense, because it really is. Pretend that we're pretenders who pretend all that we see. Pretend that there is nothing that we cannot be. That all of life is pretend.